Hi, Tom. Nice to see your wall.
So now I think, if I understand things right, we're going to have a Q&A session and bring in the previous speakers, Andy and Laurie. Is this right? But just
wait. Bring her in then. Just the two of us.
Okay, I'm not picking up any other chat just now. Why, Bill, Athena, do you want to tell us what you're doing at the moment? Are you you kind of gave us a global perspective of your entire career, which was overwhelming in its beauty and diversity. What's on your minds at the moment? What are you focusing on, or are you just hunkering down in Arizona and surviving the pandemic?
You're doing the same thing you did last time I saw you, which was in the pub in Ireland, saying, how do you see yourself for the next 10 years? Right? You did it again.
Oh, you knew it was coming then. Yeah.
I don't think we remember what we're doing right now. Watching our kids work.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, you've done a lot of traveling and teaching, and maybe not been able to do that this year, as I think practically everybody in Ibuki, their year just disappeared from training activities and going to conferences. And I think in some ways that sudden change, it can be a bit daunting, but it opens up other possibilities to reflect and to do different things. I know we completely clay plastered our office and had a lot of fun and experimentation doing that. Have you been doing that sort of thing, or writing books, or?
We just had a group. We did cancel most events, but we had a group of high school kids in a gap year going to college. Just spend a week here, but it was great watching them. We were watching the boys, our kids, take over and start all the experimenting that we did 20 years ago. So we're watching them taking new resources such as Amazon boxes that we have piles and piles of, and buying a paper shredder and shredding the cardboard and mixing it with the clay and getting pretty amazing exterior plaster results, right? That last for a long, they're incredibly hard and incredibly resistant to the rain, right? So I just plastered with these kids an outside building, and easiest plaster I've ever worked with, right? To go back and fix with kids, because there's hardly any sand in it, and the cardboard does something magical. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I think that's something that most of us can try at home. I see we've been joined by Helen and Andy.
Hi.
Now I've got a couple of questions I picked out from the chat earlier, and both, you might have a response to this as well. But Alan, there was a couple of questions about asking whether you put any protection in against termites, because there was, I think certainly somebody from Zimbabwe was asking, they have an issue of termites coming in and eating the straw in the cob. Is that an issue where you are?
So it depends on the area in South Africa. So you get many different species of termites, and some eat straw and some don't. So the first thing I'll do is put straw. I'll look, if there are termites in there, I'll go and look for a nest, and I'll put a lot of straw there, and I'll just see if they're interested or not. So that's number one. If there's uncertainty, then we tend to be cautious. So we'll, I've sometimes used complete metal cappings on the top, on the stem wall, but that's expensive. It's not my preference, but I'd rather not do that. And you've got to seal because the sheets only come a certain length, so you've got to put rubber gaskets and polyurethanes and horrible stuff to sort of make a complete, because they can get through absolutely anything. All the punches, the fixing holes are points in which they can get through. And you've got to have a kind of turn down. You've got to have a kind of lip so it's like a drip edge that they can't kind of crawl over, or if they do, you'll see where they're going through. But what I've more recently come across is what's called diatomaceous earth, and that's actually excellent. So that's a volcanic, it's almost like glass for these little insects walking across a bed of shredded glass or worse. So they just can't move across it. So you use that as a physical barrier. So we'll put it with the gravel bed in the base, and we'll sometimes also put it as a sort of skirting around the base of the building, just to stop them coming in. So yeah, those are the kind of methods I've been involved in. Then in terms of timber, I've also been involved in moon phase harvesting. So it's a research that I got into from some old farmers, and that's cutting timbers at very specific times in between the equinox and solstice, winter solstice. So in the autumn phase, when the trees are hibernating, you cut in the 72 hours before the new moon. So not on the new moon or after, that's too late. It's got to be in that period. And then it's amazing. The wood's a completely different quality, and insects are generally, it's got very little food in it when you cut it at that time. So much more stable, and the insects are not interested in general. You can't rule it out, but
So I've got a comment here from Lou Hailstrap saying, diatomaceous earth, we use that against red mites in chicken houses. It desiccates the bugs. Helen, Athena, am I right that you don't get termites in America?
No.
They say that the Sonoran Desert, which is just on the edge of where we live, has more termites than any place else on the planet. We found that out working in Mexico. I think probably, everything, I would agree what was said, just simply that I think the most important thing we found in Mexico is not running the plasters to the ground, to making a clear division, making your stem wall come up high enough so that you've got a break. And if they do tunnel up, you can see them, right? And that's probably the simplest thing that we've done. We haven't done much. I'm aware of, what was being mentioned, but it's like in terms of practical application, that's probably the main thing.
Yeah. How about you, Helen? Did that affect your works, the bugs in
well, yes, there's always plenty. Then we have leaf cutter ants that like to make a huge house below your house, so your house could probably collapse, over the years. So yeah, we're always battling with all sorts of different natural ingredients and trying to just keep. Yes, and we have the same thing with the stem walls coming up high, but they can get into your stem walls, they can be, and then there's all sorts of other things boring into. Lime is very good because of obviously it's very cleansing and sealing unless that way, but again, you've just got to get it right and at the right moment, otherwise. And then the thing about cutting as well, we had that with bamboo, cutting 3 days before the new moon and everything. So that's, it's very good to listen to local tips because they know best usually when it comes to that sort of control.
Now after 30 years, it's the woodpeckers.
Right?
Well, okay. It's like just ideal nesting place, and they can hollow a hole out, go in there, throw all the straw out. It's like ideal.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to share your house.
There's a question here on the chat, and do keep in your questions into the chat, everybody. Here for Bill and Athena, whether you've been affected by designing for earthquakes in your work. Do they affect your regions at all?
Not where we're living, no. We watch the California people and tell them to move.
Yeah.
No, we don't. Earthquakes are not an issue for us. But I think what we do build with straw bales, the system we use is very resistant.
Yeah, I think most of the work I've seen on anti-earthquake straw bale has focused on embedding mesh into the external renders to give it a string vest approach.
We don't do
I just wanted to butt in. I was going to help with the Q&A with Tom because I heard you talking about woodpeckers. We have problems in East Anglia with woodpeckers not attacking the clay buildings themselves, but going after the bees. So the bees are living in the buildings and in the walls, and the woodpeckers go after them.
Huh.
Yeah. And masonry bees can make a right mess of an earth wall. We've had ones that have been honeycombed right out by a long infestation.
Yeah, I think it's a question of management, though, isn't it?
Okay, a question for Andy. Is there any reason why he leaves the bales after dipping for a day other than to reduce the mess?
No, so that person must have kind of got the wrong end of the stick. So we will dip, and in the same day re-erect the bales. So we know I've never left them overnight. Yeah, so because they typically here they'd be, unless it was very wet conditions, which you wouldn't want people building in those conditions. So yeah, they'd be too dry. You know, then you'd have a sort of solid block, and then you're kind of defeating the purpose of kind of having a live clay that you can work immediately as you stack those cob bales.
But when you were talking, you were saying that the slip goes in maybe 70 or 90 mil into the...
Yeah, you've got to force it in. So it's not just so dipping is actually, you know, I tend to use that term, and but it's more pre-coating is a better description, because you're using what I call a cobbing stick. I don't know how people cob in the rest of the world, but you're using it to work that clay. It's just a little pointed stick, and so we use that and our fingers to work that clay right into the bale. So you're getting, as I say, 70 or more into the bale.
And do you think there'd be a problem of it drying out if you were to use that approach in a damper climate like Scotland? Or
how do you mean by drying out?
Well, I guess you enjoy perhaps a drier climate down there than we do, and you know the amount of moisture that you're putting in, or really is it just like a slip coating like to our cobos, and it will dry out over
it will dry out, yeah, and essentially like I showed in a couple of the workshops where we had less than ideal conditions. You can't change a workshop, it's been set. People have come from all over, and myself included sometimes, so you got to kind of press on. And so where we've had wet condition or drizzle even, we've had to sort of work inside the structures and then use a stiffer mix, closer to an adobe consistency, a little bit runnier maybe, and work it like that, but still in these kind of dip tanks.
There was one question, do you trim the bales before?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I said, my preference is bales laid on edge, particularly for this method, and then there's no trimming required, or virtually none, because the straw is then lying vertically. Whereas when you build with them flat, you've got much more mess actually. And then yes, those projects where the clients sort of pushed me to rather build with them flat, then they had to trim after the initial, that kind of cobbish layer had worked, surface had dried. They had to then come and trim all these straws sticking out, which was quite laborious. Whereas when you do it on edge, less bales, less work, and no trimming, so virtually none.
There's a question here from Karen Hood-Cree for Bill and Athena. Are your projects still ongoing with children in need, and if so, which countries?
You take it.
No, right now we haven't been working outside of the country, or have in other ways than building. We haven't, but
Mexico, you know, that we got a lot of publicity for was like a phase of our life, and I think it really laid the groundwork for what we do now. And working with the women and the children, that was definitely part of it. And I think it continues on into the work that we do now. I mean, a lot of it transferred to our kids, right, who have grown up doing it. We see it there, and we take other opportunities. We're working with schools and, you know, other groups, but it's about it for now. I think just that was then, and now is now. And I'm not sure what now is, but anyway, we're in the now.
I don't think anybody does.
So Helen, another question: are there any specific design or construction considerations taken in response and resilience to hurricane?
Well, at the moment, we're still the country's still recovering, obviously, if we mean the specific hurricanes at the moment. But obviously the adobe, the reinforced adobe, and the improved adobe techniques which have been used for the last 20 years. There have been housing projects built after Hurricane Mitch. They're models for maybe the future hurricane projects, proposed hurricane projects. I haven't been in touch with anybody immediately. I mean, now they're still in an emergency situation, but the adobe improved and adobe reinforced adobe, which is used in El Salvador as well, and that's where they had the building code. Someone was asking me about the building code, and that was in 2001 after they had a big earthquake there. So there are all these natural and not natural disasters taken into account, obviously, for improving all the earth building to keep it surviving. And so yes, there's a whole list of different ways of building and the different improved actual soil mixes, and the technique that method that B. Rowan was using and brought to us recently is, again, she's working in hurricane areas and seeing about the mix of lime with clay, which does make for a more resilient mix. So there's a lot of work going on in that area. There is a link to her manual as well, and so I can pass on any links that we use, and I think that will get some interesting discussions for people. And in our particular continental main network is Proterre, which is right through the continent, the Spanish-speaking continent, and Spain and Portugal. So there's a lot of work, yes.
Okay, so there's just one more quick question I've got for Andy, and then we're going to carry on the session with Bill and Athena, and then I think they're going to do a presentation of some description as well. Just the final question for Andy: was there any kind of protective layer between the stone and the new straw when you were building on a ruin?
Yeah, so there we put a damp-proof layer on top of the stem wall. Yeah. So in the early days, we didn't know better, then there were those pins that sort of you stake it on. I found they were useless. The pins that did nothing, just created a danger on site. And yeah, and the damp proof now we protect. The bales don't go straight on the damp proof. They go on that ladder plate, and the damp proof's underneath that. We'll typically put a geofabric on top or house wrap or something to protect the DPC if they're not, something tough.
Okay, great. So I think we're now going to say thank you to Helen and Andy, and then we're going to carry on with Bill and Athena.